a lot of comedian friends of mine actually got scared because they thought that set a really bad precedent. Because if Will Smith can get away with it, if I'm at an open mic, I say something, trying out a shitty joke, lands the wrong way, some guy gets mad. Will Smith got away with it, so why can't I? And we're like, oh, should we be scared? And it's weird because when you're on stage, especially when it's a performance, folks are there for you. The venue is relying on you basically to run a show as a producer, even if not even as a performer, um, to basically have control of the audience. If one audience member gets out of hand, I think a lot of comedians, especially when you're performing, feel it's our responsibility to basically talk down the situation. And I think we get that a lot in the form of hecklers. Hecklers is like, they'll basically do that kind of verbal intersection, sometimes like verbal abuse while you're on stage. And it's kind of the comedian's job to shut it down. But when it gets physical, then it gets really weird, right? Because then you kind of want to keep control of things. You don't want to ruin the night. And then someone's coming on stage. You got like maybe like 2-3 seconds to react. You don't know what's happening. Most of us aren't fighters, right? That's why we're talking and not fighting. And yeah, that did scare us for a bit. That did. And I think it is getting to a point where I think us as a society have to come to some kind of common ground to say, look, we understand that these are jokes. We understand when what you're saying is not a joke, because sometimes comedians won't admit that. Because especially when you're on stage, if you're just trying something out, or if you're riffing or doing what the guy you saw do, the crowd work on the fly, sometimes it doesn't land. Sometimes there is no punchline. And I've been in that situation where I've like rambled. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, oh no, I got no punchline. And I think as a comedian, it's important to acknowledge that, to be like, whoops.
Yeah.
I went in a certain way. And usually audience members laugh with you because they're with you. They don't want you to fail. And I think that's one of the most awesome things about live theater or live performances in general is the audience does not want you to fail, which I think is so cool. Because when you're failing and you acknowledge it as a comedian, they'll laugh with you because they're with you. They want you to succeed because when you succeed, they laugh. They don't want to watch your burning ship because
they're not going to be laughing anymore after that. That's why it's just like, oh no, like they're there for a specific reason, or it's just like, I paid $10, right, to have a laugh, right? Like, you better keep making me laugh. Like, just get back on track.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I think with live theater is when the performer is uncomfortable, and then you feel uncomfortable because they're uncomfortable. Because you're part of the process now, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no. And I think as long as I think acknowledging it goes a long way. I mean, if you're just like a shitty audience member, sometimes there's nothing you can do. But I think just acknowledging like, whoops, went a step too far, or got off track. Usually they'll come back with you. And that's something I'm constantly trying to practice and learn. And it's not easy because you do feel like you are in command and you have to put your best foot forward. And once things go derailed and you're like, oh no, what do I do? You do go panic. But I think with practice and just knowing that the audience is on your side, then you should be okay.
I think one thing about the whole Will Smith situation is, one, when Chris Rock took the slap, right? Like, it was actually pretty, cool, no pun intended, how normal, well, not normal, he was obviously stunned, right? Like, that this is actually happening. But to play it off as calmly and cool, right, as he did in front of obviously a live stage,
so
and
level-headed.
It was just like, he took the hit, he's stunned, he's like, wow, that actually happened. It's like, we're at the Oscars, baby, right? Like, essentially, and it was just, yeah, he just took it really calmly, and probably set a good example for comedians in terms of how you diffuse a situation just kind of in that moment, because obviously he's not expecting obviously to get hit. And even when Will Smith started heckling him, and we'll just use that in that term, I think it's the right term for that situation, he was just like, it's a joke, right? Like, I guess I'm surprised that Will Smith as another actor, right? Because like, you know, like you're in an actor when you're with a bunch of other actors, I would just imagine, you know, even if something is a joke or offensive, that you understand this is an actor's space. It's like if it's like almost saying if another comedian made a joke and you know they got upset, right? And you know they started heckling another comedian, right? Like I don't know, it's kind of weird to have it come like full circle. You're supposed to be in a safe space as actors, as part of your profession, but to kind of act as like you know another random member of the audience, right? That you know is not aware of what it's like to actually be an actor on stage and to what you could say mess up or you know say something uh, potentially inappropriate, right? Like he definitely did not allow for that safe space to happen, especially in an award ceremony.
Yeah, that was, yeah. I I think you beautifully worded it, and yeah, kudos to Chris Rock for just rolling and keeping professional. Because if that happened to me, I think I might have freaked out. 'Cause I think the only two people that have slapped me in my life are like my mom.
And your dad.
Yeah, probably. I was about to say my sister. I don't even think my sister's done it. Like, shit. Like, yeah, for that to happen, I'd be flabbergasted. I think I would lose all sense of professionalism. 'Cause I I is this PG-13 or can I like?
Yeah, yeah, it's PG-13, or you could swear, it's fine.
So I had a bit about the Olympics, and I didn't even know how to react. It wasn't even like a physical heckle; it was a verbal one, and I was like, the Olympics were coming up. It was like I think the Tokyo one,
Yeah.
and I said, you know, one of our Canadian Olympians on the swim team won a gold medal when she was 16, and I asked the audience, "What have you done when you were 16?" And then someone yelled, "Suck a lot of dick." I didn't know how to react. I was just like, I don't know. There's no gold medal for that. I don't know what do I say.
That's the joke. That's the proper response. There's no gold medal for that. I mean, maybe unless there's you know some you know $100 coins that are involved.
Yeah, I think that was one of the best heckles I've ever gotten. It was constructive because now every time I do that joke, I say that part too. And I'm like, yo, what would the criteria be? Like, how many you can go at once, or like? But yeah, I definitely know the feeling of being flabbergasted, especially when you're on the spot. It is not a nice feeling. It is almost as bad as bombing because if you bomb, at least you're present and you know. When you're flabbergasted, you're almost stuck in the past
Right.
as the world moves around you, and you're like, oh no,
Like
what
you're
am
in
I
panic
doing?
mode, I would imagine. Like when you're flabbergasted, but you're in panic mode, but you don't have time to think, right? Of like what is you know what's like one answer that I could just use like a trump card, like get out of jail free card, like that I could just say right now, and that'll get me out of this situation to whatever recalibrate myself.
Yeah, that's one thing I would love to ask other comedians too. Is like, what goes through your head when you're like bombing or like when you're like panicking? Because for me, I'm like, I spiral sometimes where I'm like, yo, you're bombing. You gotta pull him back. How do you pull him back? Oh wait, you're thinking. They can see you thinking. I wonder how stupid your face looks every now and then. Just like spiral. And I love to hear what other comedians think because maybe they're like, man, fuck these guys or something.
You know, something that I learned from I forgot. I learned from someone at not at Jam City, but at another workplace was the power of a long pause. Right? So the
Mm.
long pause, it creates this one, I think it helps reset, you know, environment, right? And also it makes it seem like you're thinking about something very profound, even if you are flabbergasted or like, you know, kind of blank in the head, but you just stare at that, you know, either stare at space or stare at something, right? The long
I
pause
like that.
makes it seem like you have something very profound, and then you just move on from that. That you, I would, that I mean, maybe that could be a way to get out of it. Is just long silence is actually
Yeah.
your friend, right? If something happens, because you know the crowd will start to die down a little bit because they'll be like, oh, what's what's Andy gonna say, right? Like, you know, it must be
What's next?
something.
It's gonna be
Yeah,
good.
it's gonna be good. The suspense is killing me. And it's like well, that's it, guys, right? You just, that's what, like that's a way to, break the ice is with long pauses and silence.
Yeah, I really like that, and that's something I've been trying to become better at, and I think a lot of comedians could be better at is leaning into the silence. Because I think Trevor Noah put it the best. He used to be really scared of silences until someone was like, when they're silent, that means they're listening.
It's true.
Because that means they're like, okay, what? Yeah, right. It's not like they're talking with each other. They're silent, so they're waiting for you what you're gonna say next. And that you got their attention. So I'm trying to lean into that a lot more. But I would say for even myself and a lot of other comedians, silence is one of our worst enemies because that means they're not laughing.
But I think it's silence when you're in control of that silence. That's the difference,
Yeah,
right?
when you're out of control.
Yeah. When you're inducing the silence versus like they're silent after you try to land, a specific type of joke.
Yes, that then you're just bombing. Which you can also lean into. One of my old comedy teachers was like, I lean into bombs. I want to see how far I can push it. Which makes sense. Because one thing as a comedian, I would say, is like you really have to love the feeling. Because the time to return ratio is so low. And I like to give you like uh an understanding of it. Usually when you go to open mic, you get 5 minutes. But there's probably like 20 or 30 people signed up that night. So it might the open mic might start at like 8 or 9, but like 5 minutes each. The host might do their own little thing, transition jokes. So really, it's like round up to like 6 or 7 minutes each. 30 people, you're looking at 180 minutes. Min, that's like a 3 hour open mic. And common courtesy is you try to stay for as long as you can. Like ballpark that to like an hour. So you're staying basically an hour to do 5 minutes, which is like crazy inefficient in terms of time spent and
Sure.
return. Because yeah, you're only getting that like 5 minutes of feedback, and when you do that 5 minutes, it's not like you can like click pause, take feedback notes, or whatever. You just gotta it's real time. You gotta basically make note of it as you go, and then you sit back down for another 55 minutes for other people. So it's like 5 minutes for 55 minutes for other people. The return ratio is so low, but if you love it enough, that's what you do.
I think there's two things. One, I think even though you would perform for 5 minutes, right, you get to watch other people. You get to watch other people's mistakes, right? So I think the ROI is a little bit higher on that end by watching other people's mistakes and figuring out how you can incorporate it, whether you what to do or what not to do. Um, I was gonna say, I totally forgot what I was gonna say for the second part. I think it was more in lines with being impromptu or improvising, right? I think there are people that they just think in jokes either all the time or they have some sort of like reaction, right, to things. So like let's say for example, like when you watch Dave Chappelle, right, like he is someone who is probably thinking in jokes all the time because he knows on the spot like how to recover right immediately or just like transition into something. So I feel like there are people who are just always in that mindset. I'll give you an example. One of my friends, he's an aspiring musician, and he does nerd rapping, which is basically he talks about like anime or games or different things like that. I think he made a song about boba tea one time. And if you
Nice.
ask someone like who's in that profession to rap, right? It's like, okay, maybe they'll ask for like, here's some words, right? Like that you could integrate. They'll find ways to integrate it, right? Just because they're always in that mindset. And so whether it's like uh and he actually did a pretty good job actually where someone said like Super Smash Brothers or like Boba Tea, right? Like, they'll figure out different kinds of wordplay, right, to try to make it work, um, even though they may not know what they're doing at the time, they just find like the right topics to contrast it against, whether it's wordplay or like the topic is obviously they put it against something that's also very ironic.
I like that. I really like that. I think, and I don't know if this may be a controversial take. Really good creativity comes with constraints.
It's true.
That's what I like to think, because it's like when you're like you can do anything, and
Yeah.
you're like the options are too many. I don't know. I don't have a framework.
You're gonna
Where do I
overthink it.
stop? Where do I go? Yeah. Whereas like when it's like here is the box. Do what you want within or without the box.
Yeah.
Then at least you got like some kind of thing to ground you. And I think being creative doesn't necessarily mean you have to be good with words or you have to be good with visual arts or anything. Being creative is being able to play around a set of constraints. That's kind of how I like to think about it. And when you get a set of constraints, I really think that's when folks are able to be even more creative than just anything goes. It's like, where do you go?
Right. Exactly. The pressure makes the diamond.
Exactly. Yeah. I really like that saying.
Cool.
Today I learned.
I'm glad you learned something, because I'm always learning. I feel like I'm learning something from you about comedy and just kind of how it all
Oh,
works.
thank you.